Is the trade market dead for the Cleveland Guardians this offseason? We'll talk about why that may or may not be the case and why it may or may not be a good thing for the Guardians. Free agency might be the path forward for the Guardians. We'll also talk about that. And there are some arbitration cases to watch for the Guardians. Not their own, but some other ones, and why they matter and why we should be paying attention.
Tanner Bibee of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome on into a Trade Talk Thursday edition of Locked On Guardians. I'm your host, Justin Latta. Thank you for tuning in. Jeff's off for the day again as well as we continue to do solo episodes. But it's Trade Talk Thursday, so we're here with you. We're going to talk about some latest trade news involving a couple of teams the Guardians might have been involved with and why those trades probably are dead for both those teams and the Guardians. We'll talk about why free agency might be the path forward and a perfect free agent fit for this team, why they should absolutely do it. We'll talk about if this farm system is actually trade ready and why to pay attention to that going into the season. And there are some arbitration cases you want to pay attention to. The Guardians should be paying attention to this offseason as well. And I know it's been 4 years since the Francisco Lindor trade, so I have that in my budget today to talk about, but we don't get to it. But we'll see if it fits in there. We might bring it up on Monday. Before we get rolling on today's Trade Talk Thursday episode, make sure you are checking out Gametime. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. I am Justin Ladd. I am your host. I have been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007, way back with Indians Baseball Insider, Guardians Baseball Insider, Burning River Baseball. It's pronounced Lajoie, a whole host of other places I've been. I'm currently at the News Herald and the Morning Journal, next year in Cleveland on Substack. Sign up for that to get all that fun prospect stuff coming into your inbox. Eventually, I'll throw a link your way for that if you're interested in that. But you're here for Trade Talk Thursday, right? That's why we're here. So last week, I've kind of sat on this one for a while to talk about this on the show. But last week, there was a rumor or an article coming out from St. Louis talking about the Cardinals engaging the market for a late inning reliever, specifically through a trade, which is interesting because they want to move Ryan Helsley, who, you know, is a little expensive, right? That's a guy, at least for them. This is a team that really wants to cut payroll, which most of Major League Baseball is doing this offseason. If you're not named the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Mets, you know, that's just where we are. But they want to trade. They've considered moving Ryan Helsley. They obviously want to trade Nolan Arenado, right? That's been the big thing over the winter. They're trying to move Nolan Arenado off the books. But Ryan Helsley is almost a $7 million player. So they've toyed with him, moving him. They've talked about Steven Matz as well. There's been rumors about Eric Fedde. Obviously, the Guardians have checked in on Fedde and Matz. And it really kind of feels like the rumors involving the Guardians and the Cardinals when it involves Matz and Fedde is pretty much dead. And I think those rumors probably died. Those conversations probably took a back seat once Cleveland moved Josh Naylor and got Slade Ciccone in return. I don't know if they're going to really prioritize Fedde at this point. They liked Fedde last year, and the White Sox were just not willing to trade him in division. And it showed because they got a very poor return, I feel like. And that's coming from someone who actually really liked Miguel Vargas from the Dodgers, one of the guys they got back in years past. I think they did a very poor job for that market. And Eric Fedde, chances are they might have gotten more this offseason when things opened up a little bit more, because they did a great on the Garrett Crochet trade, which we're going to sort of talk about here in our Trade Talk Thursday segment. But I get the sense that these trades, and these are my famous last words, that I'm saying they'll be dead. And maybe my jinx will be talking about it's dead and then it'll get revived, right? But I get the sense this is probably a very low level conversation now, because the Guardians went out and got Ciccone, and those rumors were before that for the Josh Naylor trade. That doesn't mean they still can't make the trade. And I had said all along, if the Guardians were going to make a move with the Cardinals, I thought that Tristan McKenzie might be involved, because it would have given him a new situation. The Cardinals could have used a cheaper starter at the back end. And we talked about dangling bullpen guys. Hunter Gaddis made a lot of sense. Hunter Gaddis would still make a lot of sense for the Cardinals. He's cheap. He's young. He's controllable. He's good. He had a great season. And I think that the time would be good for Cleveland to capitalize on moving him. However, It doesn't make sense for Steven Matz because that's a massive salary Cleveland doesn't want to take on. I thought Steven Matz coming to Cleveland would have been more sensical and moving like Miles Straw and swapping some money off there because Matz is a free agent at the end of the year. And they're still paying Miles Straw. And the Cardinals were looking to kind of pare down money as well. So I don't see Cleveland wanting to take on Matz. And the Cardinals obviously want to get cheaper too, which, is unfortunate. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, go get Lars Nootbaar or Jordan Walker. The Cardinals are not trading young, cheap players. If you've seen all the rumors out this offseason, they want to trade, Nolan Arenado, who's expensive. They want to trade Steven Matz, who's not young and who is very expensive and is also not very good. Ryan Helsley is good, but they're willing to consider moving his money because they want to move money. This is also a team with a TV issue that they're gonna talk about too. But I think these talks are probably dead. I think Gaddis makes a lot of sense over there for them, and it would be fantastic to get a guy like Lars Nootbaar back in that trade. He's only making $2.5 million, and he would make a ton of sense for Cleveland. And I wouldn't trade Hunter Gaddis for Eric Fetty straight up anyway. I think this had to be a multiplayer swap, but I think those talks are pretty much on the back burner now, and they could be revived. Who knows? Teams talk all the time, and they come back with they continue to talk about their players with their teams, assessing value, trying to get the best deal they can, and they might circle back with a team that hasn't found a partner either. But I think the Cardinals are also kind of gummed up by wanting to trade Nolan Arenado, and they're not going to do anything until they do that because it's going to be awkward if he comes back to St. Louis next year after all this. So I kind of feel like they're kind of wading the waters a little bit. Maybe they'll wind up trading Ryan Helsley, but it sounds like they want to add relief help. If they trade Helsley, they might find interest in Gaddis again if Helsley goes elsewhere and they want to add a back-end reliever and they don't want to pay big money on the free agent market. They could maybe circle back on a guy like Gaddis. So, TBD, this could still be revived, and who knows what happens in the summer. If the Cardinals are paring down money, they don't get better. They're in a division that's semi-competitive. Both Centrals are semi-competitive. The AL Central was 3 out of the 4 final teams last year in the AL, but we'll talk more about trades in the AL Central in a second too. Tampa Bay, talking about trades that are dead. So Ken Rosenthal from The Athletic had the article earlier this week too that said that Tampa Bay now appears to be looking to hold on to Brandon Lowe. I'm never going to get those right. Brandon Lowe. They're going to be holding on to their second baseman going into the year, and they're going to hold on to Yandy Diaz, which makes sense why Yandy Diaz trade never materialized for Cleveland. It looks like they're going to be holding on to those guys going into the year, and part of the reasoning was they're playing a hitter's ballpark. They've already cleared a lot of money. They can still be competitive. Now, Tampa Bay is in a weird situation, so I think this is one the Bears watching going into the summer because Tampa Bay has a lot of pitching. They're going to be much better. They're going to get Shane McClanahan back. They just re-upped with Drew Rasmussen. They've got a pretty young pitching core. Shane Baz is going to be healthy, maybe. I guess you really never know. But they have Taj Bradley, Ryan Pepio, Zach Littell. They've got a lot of guys in that upper level of pitching right there. It's a good rotation. However, they could take steps forward. Junior Caminero obviously would get a full year there. They did get Christopher Morel, who they like, who could rebound, right? They've got Johnny DeLuca playing full-time this year. They're hoping to get improvements that way. However, in the East is wide open, right? The Yankees are probably a worse team than they were a year ago, but they still did add Max Fried. They may not be done. They got Devin Williams. The Orioles are definitely worse than they were a year ago, losing Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander, and they added, a bunch of back-end type pitchers. They added Tyler O'Neill, who's maybe just as good as Santander, so maybe they're even. They're definitely worse pitching-wise. The Red Sox got Garrett Crochet, but they still want to get a big bat, and that bat might be Alex Bregman or Nolan Arenado, which doesn't really strike me as anything major, but they've got guys close to the majors too, so the Red Sox are still in it. The Blue Jays aren't any better than they were a year ago either. They're certainly probably worse, if anything. They've struck out on other free agents again. So the Rays have a chance in the AL East, and with their pitching to get back to the wild card. They're in a weird situation with their ballpark and it being a very hitter-friendly ballpark, which might be good for their offense. Hopefully they've got enough. They're going to hope they have enough pitching to combat on the other side of things. So watch them going into summer. They're always interesting. Maybe they feel like a prospect will emerge or they want to dump Brandon Lowe at some point during the year, I would watch that going into the summer. However, the second base situation could be rectified by Cleveland at some point. TBD on that one too. I think it's still something to watch going into the summer. Those two teams are always making deals, and Tampa Bay there are some players in the Guardian system Tampa Bay would like if they do fall into a situation where they're going to make moves. And Tampa Bay is always on that buy-sell cusp line, no matter their record, unless they're really all in, and they may not be all in. They may be in a wild card hunt this year. So I would, Tampa Bay is with especially specifically Brandon Lowe, whatever we're calling him, their second baseman. And maybe even Yandy Diaz. I think there's a chance. Like, if the Guardians are in it and Carlos Santana is not working out, or David Fry doesn't come back, or Manzardo struggling, Yandy Diaz could be a guy they turn to as a rental at the end of the year if Tampa Bay is out of it. They're holding now, but the Rays are never unwilling to part with guys on rentals, and Cleveland's not really usually a rental market type trade team. But if they're in it and they need a piece, and those two teams have made deals before, Cleveland has some pieces in their system that Tampa Bay would like. I'll talk about those later in a segment as well. That could be something to watch into the summer. Same with St. Louis, because I think St. Louis is in a worse situation than Tampa Bay in terms of the talent on their roster too. So, even though I think these trades are both dead in terms of what they look like in the winter, these are still things that could be revisited in the summer. And that might be a good thing for Cleveland. That might also be a bad thing. I'll talk about that too on the other side of today's Locked On Guardians. Before we do that, let's talk about our friends over at Rocket Money. Did you know Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you forgot about or you're paying for twice? We all have every streaming service right now. There's so many TV streaming services. We're in a weird path with all those things. You probably have all of them, and maybe you're using one or two, or maybe you're paying for something online that you just never even knew you were using. Rocket Money makes it easy to track them all down. It's kind of like a personal assistant for your finances. It kind of tells you where the money is going, and you look at that app or that streaming service you weren't using, and look at that. You just found some money back into your budget for the month. It's a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, can help you monitor your spending, lowering your bills, which we all could do these days, all in one place. They have saved users over $500 million in canceled subscriptions, and they've saved members up to $740 a year on all of the app's premium features. I've talked about using the subscription feature in the past. It's helped me find things that I really am not using anymore out of my budget. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Appreciate you guys tuning in to Locked On Guardians, making us your first listen today and every day, wherever you get podcasts, whether you're a first-time listener, and hit that subscribe button, auto download. We'd appreciate that if you're enjoying what you're hearing. And if you're an everydayer, we appreciate you being here every day too, on any platform, YouTube, audio, and even other places as well. Got some more cool content stuff to talk about at the end of today's episode. Let's kind of keep on the Trade Talk Thursday thing before I get to free agency. Jeff and I talked about on Monday, this is a very troubled trade market. There have not been a lot of big trades this offseason. Let's be honest. Let's revisit that. The biggest trades this offseason have been involving the Marlins and the White Sox. Garrett Crochet, Jesus Luzardo was one of those, right? At least in terms of prospects for major league talent, right? Because Cleveland's traded Josh Naylor, and they've gotten Ciccone back, who's not necessarily a prospect, but he's young. They got a draft pick back, so that kind of counts. And they got prospects back, Andres Jimenez and Spencer Horowitz, moving him to Pittsburgh. But they also got a rotation piece, and Luis Ortiz in Pittsburgh got Spencer Horowitz. So a lot of major league players changed hands there too. The Cubs got Kyle Tucker, but they also gave up Isaac Paredes and Hayden Wiesenski, which is kind of not a thing. But Cam Smith was the prospect in that deal. The Brewers and the Yankees pulled off a trade, which sent Nestor Cortez to the Brewers and Devin Williams to the Yankees. It's been a lot of major league talent. Brady Singer to the Reds for Jonathan India to the Royals, which we'll talk about again in a second. The big trades this offseason outside of, Gavin Lux just went for prospects. There's that, which I really liked. I know Jeff talked about. But outside of that, like the biggest trades this offseason that didn't involve the Marlins or the White Sox, who are the only two clear sellers, were pretty much all major league for major league talent. You've got your minor deals like your Eli Morgan, the Guardians traded him, right? There's been some minor deals, but Jake Berger going to the Rangers, that involved prospects because he came from the Marlins. Most of your trades this offseason have been major league for major league talent. So Cleveland's already traded major league talent. There's no one left on the major league roster to trade for them unless we're talking bullpen, which we mentioned Hunter Gaddis or another reliever possibly. That's the last place that makes any sense for them. Unless there's one of their arbitration cases they really want to move, which I don't think there is. So we'll talk about arbitration cases later in the show. But it is a tough trade market. And part of that, I think, even for Cleveland, is good and bad because you've got a lot of these teams right now that are all in this holding pattern, right? You've got the White Sox and the Marlins who are clearly dumping talent. The Rockies have no idea what they're doing. Let's be honest. The Rockies, I don't even know if they have anybody I would want for Cleveland. Like, they're just not a team that has a lot of talent I'm super interested in. We've talked about Ryan Feltner on the show in the past from them. Like, he's a guy that's a ton of very interesting for them. They've got some talent, but like, there's nobody that outside of him that I think the Rockies would even deal that makes sense for Cleveland. The Astros are still trying to compete, even though they've had a weird offseason. The whole NL East outside of the Marlins is competing. The whole NL Central is kind of competing. The Pirates are trying to compete, but they're weird. The entire NL West is competing outside of the Rockies because they don't count. Oakland, they're not even Oakland anymore. They kept Brett Rooker. They have signed free agent pitching to get around being sued by the Players Association. Like, even they're not really dumping guys. The Blue Jays aren't dumping anybody, right? The Angels haven't dumped anybody yet. They're trying to acquire players. They picked up Jorge Soler in a salary dump from the Braves, like all that stuff. So there's just not a lot of teams out there who are trading major league talent for minor league talent, which is why you've seen this going this way. And a lot of it has to do, obviously, with the extra wild cards, all that stuff, which we can debate another day if that's good or bad. But I talked about kicking the can down the road to the summer on like St. Louis or Tampa Bay, depending on what their situations look like in July. And that could be a good thing for the Guardians. It also could be a bad thing. The upside of that is I don't think that this team is big trade ready. And I mean the farm system. The farm system, I think, is in a good spot. I like the players in the farm system. I think it's probably top 5. But there's a difference between being a top 5 farm system in terms of talent and being a system that's ready to be a lot of trades from. They moved, look at last offseason or last July, right? They traded Alex Clemmie. They traded Rafael Ramirez, who didn't really break out the way we thought he would, but teams still liked him. Alex Clemmie ended up being the biggest name on that trade, I think, for the Nationals, even though Ramirez does have a ton of upside. He just hasn't hit it yet. And then there's Tana. This is not really a team right now to me that has a farm. And here's what I mean by that. Let's look at the Garrett Crochet trade, right, for the Red Sox. The Red Sox far and away had the best farm system, even better than the Dodgers. They traded their last 2 first-round picks, a really good minor league infielder who's probably a utility guy. He's Tyler Freeman-ish. That's fine. Kudos to them for moving him in a deal when Cleveland should have been doing something similar in the past, but he wasn't a headliner. And they traded a pitcher in that deal who's also really interesting. Now, obviously, they found a partner that was looking to go far down the road in the White Sox. That's the hard part. Cleveland, I don't know if they're quite ready on that level. That doesn't mean they should be hoarding their prospects, which, by the way, there was a survey of across Major League Baseball of executives recently on MLB Pipeline that said which team hoards their prospects the most. And Cleveland got the 3rd most votes. It was 18% Orioles, 18% answered other. And then the Guardians got 16%. So I don't know what other accounts for, but Cleveland got the third most votes behind the Orioles and just other. That's not really a shock. We know they hoard prospects. We know they do that. But looking at what the White Sox or the Red Sox did for the White Sox again in that trade for Crochet, the Chris Sale trade all over again, they traded 2 of their first round picks in the last 2 years, in Kyle Teel and Braden Montgomery. Really good players. Teal's going to be up soon. Montgomery's, high risk, high reward. Was kind of a dark horse number 1 guy, a lot of talent, but a lot of swing and miss. Cleveland's last 3 first round picks, you've got Travis Bazzana, who you're not trading. Chase DeLauder, who you're not trading. Ralphie Velasquez, who I don't think is a headliner yet. He could be. And then after that, you've got your Churios. You got Angel Angel Henao. You've got Welvin Francisca, right? And you've got CJ Kafis and Juan Brito. And you got your high school pitchers from a year ago. But here's the thing about that. Those high school pitchers probably don't have a ton of value yet, which is why you saw them able to trade Clemmy in season, because he pitched and kind of built some value there. They might have value coming into the year, but you're not trading your top 2 prospects, right? You're really I don't know if Ralphie's a headliner quite yet for them. He could be. I think he could be. Churio, Henao, and Francisca, I think all have varying degrees of headline ability. And I would say Henao by far, to me, should have the most. After the season he had a year ago, Churio should have a ton too. Those guys are probably 1A and 1B in terms of trade value of guys that might be worth trading, depending on what you're getting back, is not being the first round picks of the last couple of years. And I know what you're saying. Well, Boston traded their first round picks. Who cares? And Cleveland could. I'm not saying they couldn't, but they're not going to. I mean, I think we know Bazzana's not going anywhere. Very unlikely DeLauder is going anywhere. Ralphie, might be up in the air on what happens to him. But consider that all those high school picks, the pitchers from a year ago, could have more value this summer. They hold their value longer, which is good. You're going to get another season of guys like Francisca and Henao and Kafis. Brito might show something at the major league level this year. He might have another year. I don't know what happens there. You've got guys in the system that could move their way up. Plus, you're drafting again this year. So if you're talking about the draft and the trading deadline coming right after, you bolster the farm system just a little bit more before the trade deadline, and you can move some of those high school pitchers. You can move one of those infielders. And the market might be a little bit easier to navigate in season when you've got teams like St. Louis or Tampa Bay who might be in a holding pattern right now, but they might fall out of contention and decide, well, let's move some guys in the season. Or somebody else doesn't make it. The Blue Jays do fall apart next year, and they trade everybody because they're getting fired. They're in a very precarious situation, right? The Angels, maybe they get into the season and they decide we're going to dump Reed Detmers or we're going to dump Taylor Ward, and that might happen in season, right? Those are the kind of things that could happen in July, and that could be good for the Guardians because they have guys that could be attractive to teams like St. Louis and Tampa Bay and the Angels, although the Angels faster to the majors prospects, so TBD on there. So that could be a good thing for the Guardians in terms of their farm system, because I don't think they can pull off a Red Sox type trade, because the Red Sox traded those guys and they held on to their top prospects. They still have Roman Anthony, still have Marcelo Meyer, they still have Christian Robinson. They've still got just a fantastic farm system without moving some of their best prospects, because their farm system was just loaded. And that could be Cleveland. I will say there is a downside to it. The downside is high school pitchers get hurt. All pitchers get hurt. You could easily get to July and any of these high school pitchers you took in 2024 could go out to Lynchburg, or they could get hurt in spring training and need Tommy John. And that takes one bullet out of your chamber as far as a trade asset. Your Parker Messick's, your Michael Kennedy's that you just got, maybe Josh Hartle, someone that it gets interesting for somebody. But right now, those aren't frontline guys. I don't think Messick ever will be. Hartle, maybe or maybe not. So I mentioned Kennedy, the other high school kids, I'm going to bring up Tugboat. Those guys aren't headliner type pitchers. I didn't know if Clemmy was either, but Clemmy was good enough to get Lane Thomas, who ended up playing a big role for this team. And I thought was worth moving the whole trade. But the downside is guys get hurt, right? Those pitchers could easily get hurt. Any of these guys could get hurt. They could regress. I mean, they had a chance to trade, I think, Jose Tena or Brian Rocchio, and they had much more value. Now, Rocchio probably doesn't have as much value right now. Tanner, they ended up moving, but I think he also had more value previous to when they moved him. So there is a downside to waiting, and there's also the chance that Cleveland comes into 2025 and they regress. The bullpen regresses. The rotation may not be able to carry him because the additions you made aren't ready. The offense can't score because they've lost Josh Naylor, and Santana hits Father Time, all that, and Bo Naylor never figures it out. Like, there's a good chance the offense isn't good enough, and this team is not in trade mode in terms of acquiring at the deadline. There is a risk to not making a move now, but it's a tough trade market. I will acknowledge that. The Guardians make it tougher for themselves in terms of hoarding prospects and also being very hard to deal with. We know that in the past. But it does take two to tango. And I don't know if the farm system is good in terms of the players they have now, but it's not. I don't know if it's ready for what the Red Sox did in terms of getting Crochet, where they can trade 2 past first round picks and still have a really good farm system the Red Sox do. That could be them come July after the draft and some of these guys establish some more value. That could be them. But it's definitely a risk. All right, we're going to talk about one free agent. We've talked about this free agent a couple of times in the show. I'm going to make the case that this needs to be the guy they finish the offseason with. We'll talk about some arbitration cases the Guardians should be paying attention to besides their own, at least we should be paying attention to. We'll see if we have time to squeeze in a little retrospective on the Francisco Lindor deal. If not, we'll get to that Monday, all in the rest of today's Lockdown Guardians. It is one of my favorite times of the show because it's time to talk about Gametime. Did you use the Gametime app to get into that great Cavs and OKC game? Maybe you did. Hopefully it worked out for you. It was a great game to be at. It looks like it was packed. If not, we know the Cavs got a lot of other good games coming up. There's a lot of good comedians coming to town. There's a lot of concerts coming to town. I always talk about theater in Cleveland, right? Cleveland's got a great theater district, one of the best in the country. And if you want to go to any of those, Gametime can really help you out with that. They make it easy to get tickets to get to your favorite events with their new feature Gametime picks. It filters out all the fluff and it shows you the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's going to tell you exactly what kind of deal you're getting versus market value. I always use it to go to stuff because I always can do it last minute. I can always find good pricing, and I always turn on all-in pricing because I don't like to be surprised when I get the checkout and all of a sudden I've got $40, $50, $60, $70, $80 in fees at the end. I turn it all-in pricing on Gametime. I know exactly how much I'm paying to get into the event I want to go to and see if it's worth it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKDOWNMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first Gametime purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, let's talk about one free agent. This is a free agent we've talked about a ton on the show, but I think ready to kind of stick my foot in the ground on this one and say this is makes the most sense. We talked about how trades just may not be there for the Guardians this offseason anymore outside of what they've already done. The trade market might be dead for them. I think it makes way too much sense for them to sign Ha-Seong Kim from the Padres. I know Jeff talked about it on Monday. We've talked about it multiple times in the show, but I think this just makes a ton of sense. Ha-Seong Kim is coming off shoulder surgery, so he might miss the first month. We don't know how serious it is. I haven't really seen any updates on his timeline. I've tried to look. I think this is a guy, and I could be 100% wrong. I do think this is a guy who might be looking at a 1-year deal because he's coming off that surgery and might be somebody you can get in a 1-year prove-it deal. And he would be a great fit for this team because he can replace the defense you lost in Andres Jimenez because he's a Gold Glover at shortstop and second base, or he's played up to that level at both positions. He doesn't have a Gold Glove, but he's played up to Gold Glove level at both positions. He's played some third base too. He gets on base. We know this team is looking for more walks, which is part of why they moved Jimenez. They brought in Santana, moved Naylor, all that stuff. More walks. He's not without pop. Now, he's never had a slugging percentage over 400 in the majors since he's come over from Korea. But the last 3 years, he's had double-digit homers. The last 2 years, he's had over 20 steals. The year before that, he had 38 steals. The year before that, he also had 17 homers. I think he's a good bet. Now, the shoulder surgery could complicate this, no doubt. I think he's a good bet for a guy who's going to hit you 10 homers, steal 20 bases, get on base at a good clip, play great defense. If you can get him on a 1-year deal, because we're at the point of the offseason where I feel like teams would have signed him by now, and maybe that's an indication of the shoulder issue. But if I'm Cleveland, I'm asking where, figuring out the medicals. Do you want a 1-year deal? Do you want to get back on the market next year at age 29 or he'll be age 30, going into his age 30 season? He doesn't turn 30 until this October of 2025. You go back on the market after a healthy season, and that gives you a lot of cover, right? Maybe he misses April, and Juan Brito or Tyler Freeman, or maybe put Angel Martinez at second base again. Gabriel Arias is still, you ride with one of those guys in April into May. You get Kim healthy. You bring him in. He can play three infield positions if you need him to. He replaces a lot of what you lost in Jimenez. It allows you to maybe delay Brito, but like maybe Brito has a great April and you're like, crap, we can't send him down. Well, they've moved Brito around a ton. He's played right field. He's played first base. He's better as a DH. You can incorporate him if he really has that breakout. Angel Martinez, if he really looks good in April at second base, but guess what? He's played center field. He can go to center field. And then there's, Freeman and Arias. Those situations we've kind of been through. I don't know. Maybe one of them sticks, but guess what? Freeman has played center field. Arias has played right. He's been playing right all winter in Venezuela because he was so bad at shortstop, which is very bizarre. I think maybe shortstop might be out of the question for him going forward anyway. All those guys have versatility. So does Kim. He can spell Rocchio. He can spell Jose. You can incorporate Kim and not lose any of your positional. You're not forcing anybody back to AAA. You can move those guys around in pieces because you can't guarantee Will Brennan's going to figure it out this year, right? We don't know. So Brito could be an impact there. You put Martinez in center, you move Thomas to right. Kim fits. There's no, on a 1-year deal, Kim does not block anybody. Now, he could get a multi-year deal. Maybe teams feel comfortable with the medicals. I don't know. I think his market's been held up by the Nolan Arenado situation and the Alex Bregman situation because teams want to see what's going to happen with Bregman and Arenado, that back and forth, and maybe that's delaying Kim a little bit. So we'll see. That could be a great move heading into February, though, for Cleveland. If all that gets worked out with Arenado and Bregman, Bregman's going to go somewhere. Arenado may or may not. Those teams are going to have to make a move at some point and decide which way they're going. And I think that's what's holding up Kim maybe a little bit. But if his medicals are okay and he comes back in May, if you say like, okay, this is a guy that can help us out come May, he's not displacing anybody. He's not blocking anybody. He makes up for what Martinez or you lost in Jimenez, especially if it's on a 1-year deal. It just makes too much sense. Now, again, if it's a multi-year deal, maybe there's a club option for next year or, you give him some assurances with his health. We'll see. Still wouldn't be a bad idea because you can move him around too. You have him some flexibility. But I just think it makes too much sense. I think this is the guy Cleveland's got to bring in to finish the offseason. I wouldn't give him more than a 1+1. I will say, for what it's worth, FanGraphs does project Kim to, I believe, get 475, 473. If I'm Cleveland, I'm not doing that. We know Cleveland's not doing that. But if this is the guy that falls into their range, into that 1 year or 1+1, jumping all over that. Makes too much sense. And it's not really a big sexy ad, but it just makes a ton of sense for where this team is at right now because he doesn't block anybody and he makes up for what you've already traded, and he might come cheaper than he should because of the shoulder issue and the way the market. But then again, the free agency's been good to a lot of guys this year, so maybe he ends up getting more, and he should get more. There's really no reason Kim should be able to come to Cleveland, given how they operate. There's really not, but I'm hopeful maybe that's where he's at because of the shoulder surgery. And if that's the case, I hope Cleveland takes advantage. We'll see. All right, arbitration cases to watch real quick. I'm going to get into this real quick for Cleveland. So we're coming up pretty quickly on arbitration deadlines. Teams have exchanged numbers, obviously. Lane Thomas, 8.3 is the projection there. Stephen Kwan, the projection is 4.3. Ben Lively, the projection is 3.2. I would bet on Cleveland coming under on all of those. I would probably guess like 7.8, 7.9, 8 for Lane Thomas, Quan for about 4, and Lively for about 2.9. We'll see on that, how they settle. But that's not the case they should be paying attention to. Obviously, these matter for Cleveland. But the cases they should be paying attention to, if we're really holding out hope for a Tanner Bibee extension, are Tanner Houck and George Kirby, because those guys are both at ARB2 this offseason. They're both roughly around the same age, production level. Kirby's a little bit better, I will say, at this point. He's a little more proven. He's been around a little bit, and he's just his control. I mean, he's been up a little, and he's been trusted a little more by Seattle, I will say. Watch what happens with them this offseason. If they sign extensions, if they take arbitration figures, because right now it's looking for Kirby. I just lost that one for Kirby. So for the Mariners are projected to pay Kirby 5.5 in arbitration. The Red Sox are projected to have to pay Tanner Houck 4.5. See if they get extensions or not. The pitching market has been really very fruitful this offseason for free agents. We've talked about in the past about extensions looking like Snell, which is 550. So Tanner's going into his age 26 season. He'll be 26 in March before the season starts. He's got 4 years of control left with Cleveland. I think we can all agree that's probably not how it plays out in terms of him finishing his career here. We know that. But if there's 4 years left, I think it's going to take a 6-year deal. Cleveland's going to want to get 2 years of free agency in the back end, which would make Tanner a free agent at about age 32. That's going to require giving him some money, because hitting the free agent market age 32 is going to take some money from Cleveland to do that. And given how much money has worked out this offseason for free agent pitching, I think the price for him goes a little bit up in arbitration. So looking at extensions, we talked about the Blake Snell one. I'm kind of looking more now at the Brian Bayo one from the Red Sox. Now, he was 24 when he signed that deal, but it was $655. Now, Spencer Strider was 24 and got $675. I think Bibee definitely better than Bayo. Spencer Strider is in a class of his own in a lot of ways. So I would say you're looking at somewhere in the middle now, and I'm thinking it's like $660. And that's a steal for Cleveland, given the prices this offseason. You get 2 years of Tanner on the back end. And let's be honest, they probably trade him on the back end. But what you get on the front end of that is cost certainty, because you're looking at the arbitration figures of Houck and Kirby this offseason, or if they sign extensions. And the cost certainty also helps you on the back end, too. If you're going to trade Tanner at the end of his contract, which Cleveland loves to do, he's got cost certainty. He's locked up to a deal. That makes him more attractive to teams because he's locked up and because he has cost certainty. It's kind of a no-lose situation for Cleveland. Yes, pitchers get hurt, and that's what they're worried about, and they think they can develop pitching and not pay anybody, and that might be their thinking, but it's not a good one. There's not a lot of downside for Cleveland in getting him locked up to a 6-year, $60 million deal. You lock in prices. You get him, either let him go to his age 32 season at a reasonable price because the cost of pitching is only going to go up, or he's going to be cheap enough to trade. He's going to be attractive in trades at the end of that contract, probably. I don't think there's a lot of downside. They should do this. All right. That's it for this week. I'm not going to get to the Francisco Lindor trade. We will revisit that on Monday. It's been 4 years since then. I think we can all spare everybody the agony of that. I got some news I want to share, though. First, make sure you're subscribing on YouTube and downloading on all your podcast platforms. Set up auto download. We really appreciate that if you're an everydayer or even a casual listener. Just get it in your feed. And if you don't listen, come back to it. Just download it and have it in your queue. We'd love to have more reviews on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever we're calling those days. Appreciate that. You can also email the show now at loguardiansshow@gmail.com. That's loguardiansshow@gmail.com. You can email us there if you're not on social media and you're not someone who comments on YouTube. And, we got the Insider program that's finally launched. It's out there. I haven't really put it out anywhere, but we have an Insider program. Here's what you get with the Insider program. Let me tell you. Jeff and I are going to have a chance to interact with you directly on this Insider program. So it's going to be getting texts from us. And a lot of that's going to be when news happens, our first thoughts are going to be going to you. When there's something going on in a game, some kind of analysis we see to put out there, it's going to go to the insiders first through text. Any kind of that. We're going to do prospect content over there. Jeff's going to do draft content over there, whether those are rumors or analysis, mock drafts. We'll give you a link to a Google Drive too. It's going to have a bunch of content in there as well. And then, exclusive Q&As, mailbags we'll do with insiders as well. Nothing changes with the podcast. We're still free on YouTube and everywhere you get podcasts 5 days a week when spring training kicks off. We're still 3 days a week until spring training. So nothing changes with the podcast. This is an additional tier if you want to be more interactive with Jeff and I on things regarding the Guardians and baseball and the draft and prospects. And whenever we get insider info, we can also pass that on to the subscribers as well. And the link is here on the bottom line on YouTube. I'll throw it in the show description as well. If you sign up to be a insider, here's what we're pitching right now. There's no Guards Fest this year, right? We're all upset about that. Jeff and I are talking about having a subscriber-based live stream fest. And what that's going to look like is right now we're shooting for Saturday, February 1st, sometime in the late afternoon Eastern, early evening, where Jeff and I are going to log on to Zoom for like 2 hours together, and all of our subscribers will get the Zoom link, and we're just going to chat about the Guardians. Instead of, we won't have Guards Fest, we won't have players, more than likely, but we'll have, each other to talk about the season, just kind of interact. And, we're talking about some guests too. We might get some other local media involved if we can. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, let us know, because I want to finalize details on that this week. I think we're shooting for February 1st. If that's something you're interested in, sign up for the Insider program at the link there. I'll put it in the show description. Let us know if February 1st works for you. Let us know if you're interested in that, if there's a time that works for you. And we're going to go ahead and get some guests maybe lined up for that sort of thing too. We'd love to have some great interaction, not just you guys chatting with us, but it would be, like I said, an exclusive Zoom with Jeff and I, maybe some guests, where you guys can actually talk with us instead of chat with us. It wouldn't be on YouTube or anything like that, but sign up for the Insider program. If that's something you're interested in, we can get that going. Might be something we do regularly too with insiders as the season goes on. Again, podcast stays the same. That's just an additional piece of content. I'm also going to ask you guys to give back a listener survey. I'm going to put that in the show link here coming soon too. We want to get a survey for some of our listeners, just some feedback on how we're doing and things you want to see. Because at the end of the day, if you're listening to this 5 days a week, it's your show, not ours. If you're listening 5 days a week, it's got to be something you want to hear, something you enjoy. And if we can improve it, we will. So we appreciate that. Jeff and I will be back together on Monday morning headlines. We'll talk about whatever happened over the weekend, how it impacts the Guardians. If not, we'll review the Francisco Lindor trade 4 years later. We'll talk about that, and we'll have lots of other things to talk about, including hopefully Locked On Guardians live stream fest. So let us know about that. Thank you all for listening today. Appreciate it. Everybody have a good weekend. Be safe. Go Buckeyes. And we'll be back with you on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. And in the meantime, not just go Buckeyes, go Guardians, go.